समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
February 2025 is proving to be a highly eventful month for Indian geopolitics. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has undertaken two significant foreign visits, one to France and the other to the US, both being key strategic partners for India. Meanwhile, back home, there is considerable buzz around Aero India, which is a major platform showcasing various aircraft and technological advancements. So, Air Force Chief has been very angry lately. The Aero India event and a CAPS seminar held a few days before that have sparked sharp controversy this year, primarily due to certain remarks made by the Chief of Air Staff of India, who is Amarpreet Singh, at both these events. His statements, picked by the media's perpetual gaze, revealed a deep dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs, particularly his unequivocal criticism of Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, or the HAL. Let's understand what other factors have made him angry. So there is something called the Tejas fighter aircraft program. The ongoing debate between self-reliance and imports in India's defense sector is often riddled with misinformation and confusion, where facts become the casualty. A common criticism is directed at General Electric, which is GE, an American company, for not supplying engines to India without fully understanding what the Indian Air Force actually requires for specific models of its LCA aircraft program. So the statement is both true and false that GE has not been giving engines, and I'll tell you how. The process of acquiring air assets in India begins with the formulation of user requirements, which are known as the Air Staff Qualitative Requirements, ASQR, and this is shortened to Air Staff Requirement, or the ASR. Now, the first ASR for the LCA program was drafted in 1986, recognizing the need for India to develop its own fighter jets. It was around the same time that the Light Combat Aircraft Program was initiated, which was later named Tejas. Now, generally speaking, a fighter jet development program comprises four major components: airframes, engines, avionics and weapons, and control laws, which is basically the software that enables full exploitation of flight envelope. Now, among these four components, India has made significant progress in two: airframe development and control laws. Avionics and weapons have been, a bit of a mixed bag with mixed successes, but engines remain a critical weakness. The Kaveri engine developed domestically could not meet the objective of powering the LCA. While it is widely accepted that India will someday develop its own engine, achieving this milestone without foreign collaboration is unlikely today. Now, at this stage, there are three contenders, that is GE from the United States, Safran from France, and Rolls-Royce from the United Kingdom. And the government is expected to make a decision soon on who the preferred partner is going to be. But first, what's the deal with Tejas? When it comes to the LCA program, 1986 ASRs were periodically revised as the program failed to meet promised timelines and to incorporate advancements in technology. And of course, you know that this is quite crucial to ensure that the Indian Air Force remains aligned with evolving operational demands. Now, given the Indian Air Force's critically low squadron strength today, a strategy has been put in place to enhance indigenous capabilities. Now, these include the LCA Mark I, LCA Mark 1A, and the LCA Mark II fighters, each with a specific purpose and a characteristic. Now, according to the Press Information Bureau, the PIB release, which is dated 6th August 2018, HAL had received an order from the Indian Air Force for 40 LCA Mark I, which means that this Mark I Tejas comes in two variants: 20 of initial operation clearance, IOC, and 20 of final operation clearance, or FOC. The IOC contract was signed in 2006 with a 2011 deadline, while the FOC contract followed in 2010, targeting 2016. Now, the IOC certification for Tejas was granted in December 2013, and you can go and read the report yourself. Despite these agreements, the Air Chief's frustration at Aero India 2025 and a few weeks before that at the Subrata Mukherjee seminar by CAPS stems from the prolonged delay in delivering all of these 40 Mk1 aircraft, even after 2 decades, and from HAL not being able to make 11 aircraft of Mk1A minus the engine. Now, at this stage, you'd want to know what has delayed Mk1 and Mk1A. A prevalent misconception, often forwarded by HAL sympathizers, attributes these delays to engine supply issues, and of course, they blame the GE. However, this is a misrepresentation of facts. Now, it must be remembered that HAL independently committed to delivery timelines when signing the agreement for 40 Tejas Mk1 aircraft. Now, further, GE engines for the Mk1 variant were delivered on time, and there was no supply chain disruptions. The delays for delivering all 40 Mk1s, therefore, primarily stems from HAL's production inefficiencies rather than external constraints. But then there's also some good news with Mk1, which is that completion of the Mk1 deliveries are now imminent, and the IAF has no plans to pursue additional aircraft of this variant, which is the LCA Tejas Mark 1. The thing is, from its inception, Mark 1 was a compromise, and subsequent ASRs emphasized the requirement for the Tejas Mark 1A, a significantly upgraded version. So now we need to know, where is Mark 1A? HAL is now responsible for initiating Mark 1A production, which, like its predecessor, remains dependent on GE's F404 engine. So the engines are the same. The IAF has outlined a requirement for approximately 180 to 200 Mk1A fighters. The scheduled engine deliveries were expected to commence a year and a half ago, yet they have been significantly delayed due to strain on the US defense industrial base and existing production backlogs. Now, consequently, penalties have been imposed on GE for its failure to meet contractual deadlines. And when the Air Chief was speaking at Aero India, he was criticizing HAL, saying that even the 11 aircraft that were supposed to be ready, minus the engines, of course, they weren't ready either. So, what is causing the delays in the Tejas program? Let's first take up the Mark 1A. Since Mk1 is somehow managed after 2 decades of delay, I think our attention should be on Mk1A. Now, contrary to speculation, delays for GE F404 engines for Mark 1A are not the result of geopolitical maneuvering by the US. Now, the argument that America is deliberately withholding engine supplies for strategic reasons is disingenuous, which is, it's kind of weak, as India's dependency on GE engines extends way beyond the Mk1A to future platforms such as the Mark II, as well as the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft or the AMCAs. Moreover, GE also supplies engines for various global programs, including commercial aviation. Notably, its LEAP engines power Airbus aircraft used by Indian commercial airlines, and this should further dispel concerns that supply chain constraints are politically motivated. It's not in their interest. Why would they do it? The challenges surrounding India's fighter jet programs reflect a broader issue of inefficiencies within domestic production and our ecosystems rather than external interference alone. At this juncture, I have to talk about our misguided strategic culture. So the IAF's chief's frustration was not just about delays. It stemmed from a deeper issue of inefficiency and compromised professionalism across key defense institutions like our DPSUs, the Defense Public Sector Undertakings, Defense Research and Development Organization, the DRDO, as well as HAL, and the broader bureaucracy, which also includes the service headquarters itself. Now, for decades, these institutions have overpromised and underdeveloped without major course corrections, and that is the problem. AP Singh's concerns highlight a strategic culture of denial where systemic shortcomings are not fixed while external factors are conveniently blamed or the blame is shifted. Let me give you another example. Beyond LCA and its 3 variants, the Mk1, Mk1A, and 2, lies the AMCA program, which is coming across as a glaring example of this broken strategic culture. The project director for AMCA, Dr. Rajendra Krishnan, has repeatedly assured the public that AMCA will take flight in 3 years, which means in 2028, and yet not even a prototype has materialized. Now, there are crucial steps required for the first flight to take. Critical testing and certification, etc., all of which remain absent. It's clear that AMCA will not be able to take its first flight in 2028, and yet it is promised again and again. The question is, why not allude to realities and address them constructively? And this is what reflects a larger institutional tendency to overpromise without accountability, masking inefficiencies rather than addressing them. And once again, the broader concern here is the persistence of a self-defeating strategic culture that unfortunately relies on, sometimes half-truths to appear convincing. Now, if you want to get a whiff of that, just look at how much the Air Chief is criticized for stating these uncomfortable truths. Now, let me tell you a little bit about another structural problem, which is India's defense spending. And this is yet another example of flawed policies and inefficiencies. While it appears that the defense budget is increasing every year, the reality is quite different. Despite increased allocations, India struggles to spend its capital procurement budget due to delays in tendering, bureaucratic red tape, and inefficient processes. And this was once again surprisingly identified by the Defense Secretary himself. And he too was speaking at the Subrata Mukherjee seminar a few weeks ago. Our requests for information, the RFI, take years to materialize into actual procurements, often getting stuck in file movement bottlenecks. It must also be understood that the money that remains unspent, which is typically to the range of 8 to 10%, is returned to the government of India. Now, when the finance minister announces a 10 to 12% budget increment the following year, much of that comprises of the unspent funds from the previous year. And all this lands up creating an illusion of increasing defense spending without actual impact on modernization or capital procurement in proportion to either our GDP or our real security challenges. Now, by comparison, unlike the Ministry of Defense in India, if you take the example of the Pentagon in the US, that follows a different procurement model. Instead of an annual defense budget, the US allocates funding to specific projects, ensuring long-term financial commitment and continuity. Now, this project-based approach, not a year-based approach, allows for focused development, accountability, and sustained progress, something that we can also consider. Because end of the day, we all wish to break this inefficiency cycle. The inefficiencies of India's defense procurement and production ecosystem have directly impacted our national security. Unfortunately, the public discourse around it often leads to a half-baked binary between whether we want self-reliance, whether we want imports. I would say that the IAF chief's anger is justified. The true cost of inefficiency is borne by the sailors, the soldiers, and the airmen, and not by civil servants and air-conditioned officers. And this is how, at this critical juncture, it becomes unrealistic to completely reject defense imports, especially as we are struggling with maintaining our capabilities. But we need to make a more strategic approach that would involve co-production of equipment that not only meets our domestic requirements, but also facilitates exports. That is at the heart of India's emerging defense industry cooperation with the, new age defense partners. Of course, there's an old one called France, but then there's also Israel, and now there's also the US. And these defense industry relationships are complemented by strong cooperation on technological innovation. But there's just this one caveat. None of this makes genuine sense without a cogent and coherent national security strategy. And in the absence of that, we remain the prisoner of the file movement and not the strategic objectives. We need a professional strategic culture that assesses all shortcomings with brutal honesty. That was all from me today. Stay tuned.